section right here, I guess. So thank you all for being here. Good morning. So our theme this year, as Father Alex said upstairs, is Eucharistic Stewardship. And so many of you know, and in fact Father probably explained it several times already, but Eucharist comes from the Greek word for thanksgiving, or so I'm told. So let me start by giving thanks. Let us give thanks to God for bringing us together today as a community to worship together and celebrate our stewardship of His church. On behalf of Father Alex and the Stewardship Committee, the Parish Council, thanks to all of you for being here and for being amazing, generous, and faithful stewards of our church. Thank you to all the people who made this breakfast possible. I know Maria was the linchpin, but I know George and Maureen and Karen and so forth. Joe serving the food over here. So thanks to everybody. Let's give them a round of applause, please. And then thank you to my fellow Stewardship Committee members. That's George Stavros, Stefan, Louis, Kathy Cooper, Chris Mellon, and our newest member, Nicole Riley. And of course, Father Alex, for all of the work that they've done all year long to make our stewardship program possible and successful. And lastly, thank you to my family who spent most of the past several days putting together the stewardship packets, many of which you picked up. But I can say for sure that like, you know that printer scene from Office Space? We definitely had that on our mind a few times in the last couple days, because I'm also sure that mail merge, Microsoft Word mail merge, has a special place in Dante's circles. Okay? So with our theme of Eucharistic stewardship, I want to offer you a way to think about stewardship that might be new to you. I'm sure when many of us think about stewardship, we do think about the end result of where our dollars go. The gas bill, the mortgage, the HVAC system, the priest and staff salaries, all those kinds of things, right? All of those things, of course, are super important, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without them. But going back to Eucharistic stewardship, I want you to think about stewardship, both time and talent as well as treasure, as an offering of your gifts which God has given you, and to give back to Him as a way of acknowledging and showing gratitude for His generosity to us. Your stewardship should be a reflection of your thanksgiving to God for all of His blessings. The idea of offering our gifts to God in thanksgiving without concern for how these gifts are used is a very old one. In fact, the Orthodox Study Bible mentions the term whole burnt offerings over 300 times. Whole burnt offerings. What are those, right? That's the equivalent of us passing a tray on Sunday, no checks please, and then taking these and putting them all on the altar and setting fire to them. Right? That's the equivalent of whole burnt offerings, where the giving was for the sake of giving rather than for any particular purpose or reason. It was how our ancestors showed their gratitude, and how we too can show gratitude, not with the burning part though, right? So also consider the way that Jesus talks about giving. Would you believe, I found this hard to believe, but it's true, right? Financial matters are the subject of more of Jesus' parables than any other topic. He frequently instructs the rich to sell all that they have in order to find salvation. And He does sometimes instruct them to give the proceeds to the poor, but it is not the poor that Jesus thinks about in these times. Of course He does, but it is the men's souls. Father Manny preached on this a couple weeks ago. It is the men's souls that He's concerned about in those moments, because as Jesus says, the poor will always be with us. So story time. When I was a kid, probably around 10 years old, I remember a couple who gave a talk in my own church, which was a Catholic church, St. Patrick's in Brockton. This couple had converted from a Protestant church, I don't know which, and spoke that Sunday morning on the concept of tithing, which is not an idea that is very prevalent in either the Catholic or the Orthodox churches these days, from what I've seen. In fact, some will debate whether it's even a New Testament concept at all, tithing, although it does appear 10 times in the New Testament, the word. I honestly don't remember what they said that day about tithing, but I do remember the impact it had. At that time, my mother would write a check each week for our collection basket, somewhere between $5 and $10 generally. My parents were working class people, without college educations, raising 3 very hungry teenage boys, and whose peak earnings together may have reached $50,000 at before they retired. But back in the early 80s or the mid 80s, they were making more like $35,000 a year. So $5, $10 a week, that was a lot. I remember the immediate effect of this talk on tithing because the next week my mother wrote a check for $50 instead of the $10. And the week after that it was another $50, and this went on and on. And doing the math in the past tense, I calculate that to be about 7.5% of their earnings were going to the church at that time. So it really made an impact on me. Aside from the money, growing up, my father was always at the church. He was on the building committee. He was on the finance committee. He taught Sunday school. He ran the adult catechism program. He was a reader and a Eucharistic minister, for those who know what that is. He ran the bingo games on Saturday nights for well over a decade. It wasn't until many years later that he was ordained to the diaconate. My parents were my model for what stewardship was, even though I didn't know that it was called that until I joined the Orthodox Church at St. Gregory. So years later, having grown up and married, I remember this lesson of my parents' generosity. When Stephanie and I first started to get serious about being adults and managing our finances properly, I read book after book on the topic of personal finance. One stood out to me in particular, and I remember the exact day I read it because it literally changed my life. The day was Monday, April 30th, 2007. That day, I took David Bach's The Automatic Millionaire out of the library to bring with me to jury duty, because I needed something to do all day, right? And luckily, I wasn't needed for a trial, so I sat there and read that book cover to cover. There were a lot of lessons in that book, a lot of really great, important lessons, but among them was a chapter called Automatic Tithing. Now, I didn't pick this book up because I thought it was a Christian book or anything like that. I just, was looking for personal finance advice, right? So at the time, Stephanie and I were not attending church anywhere. We just had Eleni several months before, as a matter of fact. And I remember coming home that day and sharing the idea of tithing with Stephanie, not to a church, mind you, but to some suitably worthy charitable organizations. We both remember the generosity of our own parents and had been involved with charitable organizations that we wanted to support and that we knew we needed to support. We knew that we couldn't possibly afford to immediately give up 10% of our incomes as much as we might want. But the social psychology lessons offered in many of these personal finance books offered a pathway. Start somewhere, add a little bit regularly over time when the opportunity presented itself, and someday maybe we would reach our goal. So we started that day by committing 0.5% of our income to charity. Over the next several years, it went up a little bit to 0.8%, right? So small potatoes, right? Fast forward a few years, and we found ourselves as new members of St. Gregory's community. At that time, we redirected this giving that we had been giving to other charities to our stewardship here. And around that time, several years after that, I was forced to find a new job, which was a very stressful time in our lives. But by God's grace, I landed in a good place, and we were able to increase our giving to 2%. With each raise or bonus, we were able to put just a little bit more into our giving. 2 years later, we were at 3%. Then in late 2019, Father Ted and I attended the Metropolis of Boston Clergy Laity Conference together. It was held in Woburn that year, and that day I heard Bill Marianis speak in person. I know many of you know Bill. Many of you heard him speak just this past week during our parish council training, and some of you heard him speak a few weeks ago at our what's it called, the TCI, right? Help me out. Thriving Congregations. Thank you, Brian. So Bill is a big proponent of tithing, and both of his treasure and time. In fact, he tries to make sure that he commits 10% of his time as well as 10% of his income, which is really great. So Bill's words that day rekindled this flame of the goal that Stephanie and I had set for ourselves 12 years earlier at that point, right? And opened my eyes to the idea of what could be possible if more of us tithed. This talk coincided with a big promotion for me at work, so our stewardship contribution the following year was 4%. For the past 2 years, I've been blessed to receive bonuses for the work I do, and Stephanie and I agreed that we would give 10% off the top of these bonuses in stewardship above and beyond whatever commitment we had made for the year. That pushed us up to nearly 7% for this year, for this current year. A few months back, Dion Katinas handed me a book that she had picked up at a conference she attended. The book was called Money and Salvation, An Invitation to the Good Way by Dr. Andrew Galeras, which is a review of the biblical teachings from an Orthodox perspective on financial matters. Wouldn't you know that the theme of this book is all about giving as an expression of thanksgiving. What an amazing coincidence I think that was from a timeliness perspective on our theme for this year. Giving as an expression of thanksgiving. And what do you think this book suggests is the minimum amount of gratitude God deserves? It's 10%, it's tithing, right? So this concept of tithing and generosity keeps coming up in my life, in our lives, Stephanie and mine, and our families, over and over again, and in some form. And in none of these cases have I sought out, I never gone and looked up tithing to see, what it is and what I should do about it, but it keeps finding me where I am. So I think that God's been trying to tell us something, our family, me and Stephanie. So this book found me at exactly the right time. I just received a raise at work, so Stephanie and I have decided that it's time. So in 2023, we will commit 10% of our earnings, in addition to our time and talent, as we can, to St. Gregory as our stewardship commitment. So I want to be clear that it has taken us 15 years to get from that April 30th, 2007 to where we are now. And it certainly hasn't been a straight line. Some years we've had to back down from prior giving levels, other years, many years we were flat. So this is a sacrifice for us. Don't mistake that at all. I'm not trying to tell you that it's not scary to be giving away so much, especially as you all know, we have 4 kids who probably want to go to college soon, and they still want to eat 3 meals a day, every day. So it's something. But what we have to believe, what we believe in making this commitment, is that God will bless us somehow and provide for us. He will give us what we need, if not what we want. We're inspired by the 8th century story of St. Philaret the Merciful of Amnia, who, despite terrible misfortune and loss, continued to give generously to the poor, and who God continued to provide for because of his faith. So I want to leave you with this. I'm not up here to brag about our giving, and I hope none of you took it that way, and I hope it doesn't come off that way. I know that not everyone is called to tithe, and that's okay. Father said that upstairs before, that we all have our own personal journeys here, and I just wanted to share ours with you. I'm not here to tell you that I want you to tithe. I do, but only so that you too can experience the joy that it has brought us to be able to express our gratitude and thanksgiving to God in this way. I know that might sound bizarre, but honest to God, like whenever I've gotten raises and bonuses over the years with this goal in mind, the first thing I've always thought about is, this is great, I can give more to the church or to our charitable choices. So I'm here to ask you today to look within your own hearts and to prayerfully consider how you can express your gratitude and thanksgiving to Him, the Creator and source of all that we have, how to give back His own gifts to us through your time, talent, and of course treasure in the coming year. Lastly, I ask you to be very careful about what you're teaching your children. Statistics show that the most generous adults have the most generous parents. I certainly learned that lesson from my own parents, and I hope that I can pass this lesson on to my own kids. Interestingly, I recently asked my mother about that tithing talk that was given at our church so many years ago, over 30 years now. She only vaguely remembers it, and swears there's no way that they could have afforded to do what I saw them doing. So whether they did or not, it doesn't matter, because the lesson I learned was the lesson I learned and have kept with me all these years. Because I remember those $50 checks, and even if they weren't indefinite, the generosity, even if it was brief, taught me a lesson that has lasted so far in my life. So that's my story, that's our story, and thank you for listening. Just in terms of the nuts and bolts, everyone has almost everyone in this room should have a stewardship card. As usually, they've gone out to anyone who has been a steward officially in our parish here within the last 5 years. There's a couple small changes that we've made, or really one request is that we would like to begin celebrating all of you in your name days, your saints and name days. So what you'll see in your cards, and first of all, I would ask you to correct any information that is incorrect, but also fill in anything that's missing. So like your children's birth years, but also your own name days. Who is your patron saint? Whose name were you baptized, chrismated under? And what is the saint day that they celebrate? If you don't know, maybe this is a good opportunity to look it up and find out. If you do know, that's great, and if you don't, and if you just want to make it up, that's fine too. But we would like to be able to celebrate you on your name days throughout the year. We don't know how we're going to do that yet, but if we don't have the information, we can't, right? So that's number one. Number two is that several people have asked us over the past couple of years if we could kindly remind them what their previous commitment was to us. I know that sounds weird, but a lot of people simply forget. You know, they write a number down on a piece of paper and a year goes by. So we have included that whatever your last commitment was in the stewardship letter and in the commitment card this year, and it is purely for your information. It is not meant to try to get you to give a certain amount at all, but just so you have a basis for what you've committed to before. Okay. So I hope you're not offended by that. Like I said, some people asked for it, so if you have feedback on it, happy to hear it. So pick up the stewardship packets before you leave, and if you have any questions or thoughts on anything I said today, please let me know. So I hope God blesses us in St. Gregory over the next coming year. Thank you for listening.